All right, we're all here ready to go.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Let's be on the record in case number 2019-CR1396, caption State of Kansas versus Paul Salazar. Would the parties announce their appearances, please?
May it please court, the state appears to Maurice Brewer.
And Mr. Salazar appears in person and in custody via Zoom video with Counsel Mark Bostwick.
All right. We are here set down today for a plea hearing. I've received a copy of the plea petition and the amended information. So I think we're ready to go. Mr. Salazar, to take up your plea, I'm going to have to ask you a lot of questions. If at any time you can't hear me because something goes wrong with the computer, because that's happening a lot, or you don't understand a question that I ask you, I want you to tell me that so you and I can talk about it, make sure that we understand the question I'm asking in your answer. I don't want you to guess at any answers, okay? And at any time, if you want to talk to Mr. Bostwick before you answer a question, you tell me that. I have the ability to send you guys to what's called a private room so that you can talk to him without the rest of us hearing, okay? All right. Are your speakers on? Because I'm not hearing you at all.
I can hear you speak.
There you go. Okay. And when you answer, I need you to answer out loud because my court reporter here, who's going to swear you in a second, she has to take everything down. So make sure you answer out loud. Okay.
Okay.
All right. And if you would raise your right hand, she'll go ahead and swear you in now.
Please raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear that the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yep.
Thank you.
All right. Mr. Salazar, how far did you go in school?
12th grade.
All right. You read and write okay?
Yeah.
All right. As you sit here today, I know you're in custody, but are you under the influence of any alcohol or drugs or prescription medicine that might cloud your mind, keep you from understanding what you're doing today?
No, sir.
All right. Do you know what you're charged with in the original information?
Yes, sir.
All right. And you know that you're under no obligation to change your plea to one of guilty. If you wanted to maintain your not guilty plea, you would have a right to a jury trial in this case. You understand that?
Yes, sir.
At that trial, the state would have to put on enough evidence to prove you guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. You wouldn't have to prove anything yourself. Do you understand that?
Yes, sir.
Mr. Bostwick would be able to help you throughout that trial. He would cross-examine and confront all of the state's witnesses, challenge all of their evidence. He could call any witnesses you wanted called, and if they didn't want to come to court, he could use the subpoena power to make them come to court. You understand all that?
Yes, sir.
All right. At that trial, you would have a right to testify, but you'd also have a right not to testify. And if in talking with Mr. Bostwick, you decided not to testify at that trial, the state couldn't use that against you. In other words, they couldn't get up and argue, well, he must be guilty because he didn't get up and tell you his side. You understand that?
Yes, sir.
If we went through that whole trial and at the end of that trial, you were found guilty, you would have a right to appeal that conviction to an appellate court. If you didn't have the money to do that, a lawyer would be appointed to do it for you. Do you understand that?
Yes, sir.
All right. Now, if we go forward with this plea today and I accept this, you're going to be giving up all those rights. There's not going to be any kind of trial in this case. Do you understand that?
Yes, sir.
All right. I'm going to do what's called share screen right now and put up here the plea petition that Mr. Bostwick sent me in this case. Can you see that?
Yeah.
All right. Does that look familiar to you?
Yes, sir.
Is this the plea petition that Mr. Bostwick went over with you?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Now, there's a part of it where it explains what the plea agreement is. It says that you're going to be pleading guilty to counts 1 and 2, which are possession of methamphetamine and possession of hydrocodone, that the state's going to dismiss the other 2 counts. That the parties will together recommend that I give you a 20% departure from the time called for in the mid-box number of the grid, that you would get a substance abuse evaluation and follow the recommendations, pay the court costs and fees. Is that your understanding of the entire plea agreement?
Yes, sir.
Has anybody promised you anything other than what I just read to you to get you to plead guilty today?
No, sir.
Anyone place any force or threats against you to make you plead guilty?
No, sir.
All right. I see here it says that they're going to be recommending a certain sentence, in fact, a 20% departure. You understand when it comes time for sentencing, I'm going to listen to what everybody has to say and take into account their recommendations, but I'm not bound by any of those recommendations, and I can give you any sentence that the law allows. Do you understand that?
Yes, sir.
All right. Gentlemen, do you have an understanding where you believe Mr. Salazar will fall on the grid?
State believes he's an I, Your Honor.
I believe I think he has a, now that we've gone through the bond process, Judge, I think he's going to be a G. He's going to
Okay.
have one non-person, felony.
Okay.
So he'll be a G. That's my belief.
All right. And I assume, Mr. Salazar, Mr. Bostwick went over with you what you might expect your criminal history to be and what that sentence might be and all of that. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Now, I'm going to order, when we're done with this hearing today, a pre-sentence investigation. They're going to go through your criminal history and they're going to make sure that it's official. They'll send that report to both parties and they'll get a chance to look at it. And if they think there's something wrong, the state would have to prove where your criminal history is. So what I'm telling you is, while I think Mr. Bostwick has a good idea what your criminal history is and a reason to believe that it could turn out to be something higher. And if that was the case, you might get a sentence higher than you guys had talked about. Do you understand that?
Yes, sir.
In fact, what that does is that makes me today just assume, for purposes of today's hearing, that you have the very worst criminal history possible, and therefore advise you what the maximum that anybody can get for these crimes are. You understand that?
Yes, sir.
So I see here in the plea petition, and it looks correct to me, that for count one, the maximum sentence is 42 months. For count two, since in count two, you would be presumed to be an I, the maximum would be 12 months. So that's a total of 54 months together. Do you understand that that's the maximum?
Oh, yes, sir.
Each of those charges could carry a fine up to $100,000, and they would have a post-release supervision term of 12 months. You understand those are the maximums?
Yes, sir.
All right. Do you have any questions for me about anything that we've gone over today?
No, sir.
All right. And Mr. Bostwick, do you know any reason why your client should not plead guilty today?
No, sir.
All right. Then I will ask you, Mr. Salazar, as to count one of the amended information charging you with possession of methamphetamine, how do you plead, guilty or not guilty?
Guilty.
And as to count two of that information charging you with possession of hydrocodone, how do you plead, guilty or not guilty?
Guilty.
All right. Now, Mr. Salazar, I want you to listen closely because I'm going to ask the state to tell me what they think the evidence in this case would be if it went to trial. I want you to listen to that because when they're done, I'm going to ask you if that's what happened, okay?
Okay.
All right. Mr. Brewer.
For count one, on or about December 14th, 2019, Officers Markovich and Officer Pleska stopped a white Buick LeSabre in the area of 29th Street and Everett Avenue in Kansas City, Wyandotte County, Kansas, for failing to use a turn signal. The defendant was the driver and sole occupant. The officers searched the car after seeing a straw with white residue in the center console. In the center console, officers found a pill bottle with 3 baggies of a white crystal substance. That baggie was tested by Officer Passanisi on December 16th, 2019. He used a TrueNarc device that is approved by the KBI, and he received training with that device. The substance in the bag tested positive presumptively test positive for the presence of methamphetamine. Again, that happened on or about December 14th, 2019 in Wyandotte County, Kansas. As for count two, on or about December 14th, 2019, the officers stopped the defendant when they searched the car. They stopped the defendant in Kansas City, Wyandotte County, Kansas. When the officers searched the defendant's car, they found a backpack on the passenger front passenger side floorboard. Inside of the backpack, they found a baggie containing 10 white pills. The pills had M366 and were white in color. Officer Passanisi, who again was trained to use the TrueNarc device, and that device is approved by the KBI, tested the substance. It was presumptively positive for the presence of hydrocodone. Those would be the facts.
All right. Mr. Salazar, is that what happened in this case?
Yes, sir.
All right. I'm going to find that the defendant has freely, voluntarily, and intelligently entered into this plea. He knows the nature of the charges and the consequences of the plea. There has been a sufficient factual basis for finding of guilt, and I will in fact find that Mr. Salazar is guilty of counts 1 and 2. Per the plea, counts 3 and 4 are hereby dismissed. I'm going to order a pre-sentence investigation. And if you'll all give me 1 second, my assistant sent me some possible sentencing dates. I also would like to know if anybody wants to be heard about bond.
He has a detainer on him, Judge. So
I see.
that was, I learned that through an email from you.
Oh,
And,
that's right. That's right.
yeah. So I think if he bonded out, we just, he's just going to go to Johnson County. So the only thing I would ask for is, if we can get the sentencing, I fully realize we have a pre-sentence investigation report that we need, and that is attached to the plea agreement. It's fully completed. So I would just ask for the soonest possible sentencing date we could get in consideration of that PSI.
Sure.
And then for my other question is that we didn't have a preliminary hearing in this, and I don't recall that we waived prelim. At least I don't recall.
All right. Well, out of an abundance of caution at this time, on behalf of your client, do you waive preliminary hearing? Mr. Boston? Oh,
Yeah.
Did I lose everybody?
Is Mr. Salazar there?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Mr. Salazar, you understand, separate from this jury trial rights that I talked about, you would also have a right to a preliminary hearing. That's a hearing that the state would have to put on enough evidence to show the court there's probable cause, crime was committed, you committed it. Frankly, with the plea being entered, it's kind of moot at this point, but we do have to have on the record whether or not you waive that. Would you waive that today?
Yes, sir.
All right. Mr. Brewer, on behalf of the state also?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right. I'll note that both parties have waived preliminary hearing. Thank you for that, Mr. Bostwick.
No problem, Judge.
Let me see. I'm still looking down the road here for let's see, 11/6 anytime, 11/2 at 11 o'clock or later. Do either of those work better for you, Mr. Bostwick?
When you say 11 o'clock or later on 11/2, could we do it at 1:30?
Yes.
That would be great.
All right.
I'm just as long as Mr. Brewer's.
Mr. Brewer, I assume that works for you, 11/2 at 1:30?
Looks fine for me.
Okay.
That's great.
That's what I'm going to set it. Those are the dates my assistant gave me. I don't know how probation is going to feel about kind of the short setting on it, but I'm going to get this over to them along with the PSI request immediately, let them know that it was set this quick, and hopefully, particularly with Mr. Salazar being here with us, we can make this happen by 11/2.
That'd be great.
All right. Other things for a couple of things. Mr. Salazar, I need to advise you that as a convicted felon now, it's prohibited for you to own or possess a firearm, certain kind of deadly cutting instruments like dirks, daggers, switchblades, basically knives that could be considered deadly weapons. So keep that in mind. I'm probably going to have to tell you that again at sentencing, but I need to make that advisement. All right. Anything else for our record today?
Nothing, Judge.
We are adjourned. I will get that email out to all of you and get probation working on this.
Thank you, Judge.
Have a great day, everybody. Amanda, we'll see you here in a little bit.